right. We will keep moving on, and we're still talking about the nature of glamour, and it's just slightly deeper than that. We're discussing the aspects of glamour. And we just finished up with the 4 keynotes to the solution of the problem being intuition, illumination, inspiration, and also the angel of the presence. So we're going to keep going. I will call your attention to the fact that the whole problem concerns itself with the use or misuse of force or energy, and that much will clear up in your minds if you will realize 3 things. 1, that the average man in everyday life and the aspirant upon the path of probation or purification works with forces of life on the 3 planes of human endeavor, plus the 3 principles of life itself. That the disciple begins to discriminate between the forces and energy. On the path of discipleship, he begins to work with soul energy. This eventually dominates the forces. 3, that the initiate works upon the path of initiation with energy and learns to distinguish between the energy of life, the energies of the soul, and the forces of the phenomenal world. On the path of initiation, initiate works with energy, learns to distinguish between the energy of life, the energies of the soul, and the forces of the phenomenal world. And, from the standpoint of the observer at that point, I want to say that's what we're doing, and it becomes easier to distinguish. Not that in that moment we're constantly pondering what it is that we're observing. That's not necessarily the case either. It's mostly just very quiet. Another point also should be emphasized here, and that is that the nature of these forces and energies and their use and control have always to be realized and worked out in full consciousness upon the physical plane. So this is a school, right? And this is a school which is said to be the school of, by Michael Robbins, is said to be the school of magnetic response. And we're learning, and we're working to, manipulate forces and energy and control them. We're transmuting, lots of energies, and we're transmuting, we're transforming, and so this makes a lot of sense. Theory must become fact, and the battles which take place on the subtler levels of the astral and mental planes must be realized in the brain consciousness. It is there that the application is made. As these realizations and interactivities become practical parts of the disciple's life, and their consequences become clear to his perception and waking consciousness, they form in time part of his quality equipment. He is in reality integrating and synthesizing experience in the 3 worlds and becoming a master through conscious mastering. He grasps the fact that all that appears and all that happens is due to the circulation and constant mutation of force. He discovers then how these forces interplay in his own experiences in nature, and grasps then the fundamental fact that only those forces which he himself can use and master in his own life as an individual can be employed by him in group activity and be used in the dispelling of the world glamour. It might be expressed in an illustration Thus, one, through alignment and subsequent contact, the intuition is evoked, awakened, and used. This is the great dispelling agency and pours down from the plane of intuition, plane of buddhi, through the soul and the brain to the heart of the disciple. Two, through alignment and subsequent contact, the energy of the soul is evoked, awakened, and used. This is the great dissipating agency and pours down from soul levels, the higher levels of the mental plane, through the mind to the brain of the disciple, carrying illumination to the astral plane. And three, these two types of spiritual energy work differently upon forces of the personality, and their purpose and activity have to be realized in the brain consciousness of the disciple as he works upon the physical plane. 4, then and only then can the light of intuition and the light of the soul return to the astral plane through the conscious effort and the dynamic, intelligent will of the serving disciple. Ponder on these points, for they outline your way and your service. These things, as always, very deep and very interesting, and a process of invocation and evocation is outlined here again. We're bringing down, like it seems to say, so like we're bringing down this power through our work, through our doing, in a lot of ways. Through the evolution of this, I don't want to say so much of our doing as this is what's is what's happening, but there is conscious awareness and decisions, demands being made and responses being evoked and such. I have organized somewhat our ideas and outlined the plan under which we would approach this theme. I gave you certain basic concepts and a skeleton outline of the subject as a whole. And that skeleton outline is available in the PDF as in the table of contents. I want to say you have to look for there's a chart that he gave if you wish to seek that out a little bit more. I don't know if I have it on here or not. If I do, I'll put it in the notes. But today we'll begin with our real discussion. As you know, it is not my intention to write a long and ponderous thesis on this subject. The books which will be compiled from the instructions offered to these groups of disciples will not be heavy treatises, as are those on cosmic fire and white magic. They will constitute a series of relatively short volumes and must therefore be packaged with information and not discursive in style. And they will be packed with information, which, these are big, thoughtful, like these are big, single kind of concepts that are packaged, up above very tightly and have to make their way down here into words and then understanding. And it's our job to really see the depth and the meaning behind the words, and even more than that, and see this whole, as we're going through, begin to see the whole package, right? We need to see the whole package. I mean, we really do. I mean, that's the ultimate goal anyway, right? Above everything else, my brothers, these instructions must be of definitely practical value and must leave the student with the realization that he understands better the subtle world of thought currents and the forces in which he dwells. And that's what we're trying to do here. We're all trying to understand better the subtle world and the thought currents and forces in which we dwell. And that he knows better the means he must employ and the technique he must follow if he's to clear his path from darkness and confusion and follow on to light and harmony. Our study must be comparative also, and the reader must bear in mind that he will not be able to distinguish the truth or isolate that aspect of the teaching which is for him of paramount importance unless he applies that which is helpful and ascertains clearly whether he is the victim of illusion or of glamour. In the last analysis, he must know where he stands before he can take his next needed step forward. And then, we work, we hammer out the issues facing us, right? That's what we work on. It's always the present issue. It is always the next way. It's always the next step. Whatever is in front of us that is our next step, and that's what we must conquer, essentially, right? The disciple is the victim, and let us hope that we are the victim and the dissipator of both glamour and illusion, and hence the complexity of his problem and the subtlety of his difficulties. He must bear in mind, so we're saying the disciple is the victim. This is happening. This is not an option. We came to earth, we got glamorized, and we got illusioned and disillusioned and deluded and emotional and desirous and all these things. And now we have to off all of those things and thread the needle, right? So that's where we're going. He must bear in mind also for his strengthening and cheer that every bit of glamour dissipated and every illusion recognized and overcome clears the way for those who follow after. He makes easier the path of his fellow disciples. This is par excellence, the great service, and it's to this aspect of it that I call your attention, hence my attempts in these instructions to clarify this issue. Now, let me just tell you, in my experience, understanding our personality profile in astrologically, and DK makes it clear, astrologically speaking, we all need to understand our personality profile and our ascendant. And that's very basic right there. And that's at the basic level. Then, then we have these retrogrades, and we can, get the nodes and go deeper and follow our transits and see where we're actively at and going. Now, but with all that being said, to know where we are in terms of astrology would point to our potential glamours and illusions that we're susceptible to. I think I said this before, and maybe it was yesterday, but this is so true. If we have not looked at astrology, we really need to dig in. And I mean dig in because we're getting into the details now, because as we do dissipate some glamours, inevitably there's some left that we cannot see ourselves initially. They will be pointed out to us, probably in terms of somebody else or in terms of astrology, maybe by our mentor or by our astrologer or by some family member, somebody close to us who knows us very well and sees our tendencies, if everybody's paying attention in this. Because I've seen this myself to where I hang on to something, even though I thought I let it go, I'm still hanging on to something. And then maybe the path is becoming more clear, but it's not fully clear and it hasn't been fully released yet. And even when you think it's been dealt on, there's potential that it hasn't been fully dealt on yet. And it's deeper. So we need to pay attention to this stuff. And I would highly recommend getting your astrology chart done. And like I've said in the past, you can send us an email on that. Or we do have the best astrologer that I could ever we could have ever dreamt of here. I don't know what else to say about that. Just leave it at that. Hint, hint, I guess. Yeah. One of the problems which confronts the aspirant is the problem of duty recognizing glamour when it arises, and of being aware of the glamours which beset his path and the illusions which build a wall between him and the light. It is much that you have recognized that glamour and illusion exists. The majority of people are unaware of their presence, right? So it's always a problem of conscious awareness. That's always it. It's Ramana Maharshi was right when he said that, because every time we could always look at that. We didn't get in detail studying those things, though. Now we're getting into the detail. Many good people today see this not. They deify their glamours and regard their illusions as their prized and hard-won possessions in our own ignorance. And we find that out. And then there may be some tears to come from all that, right? As some of us probably know well. But we do, and some tears we cry at some point, along this for others, when we see how they see it as their prized and hard-won possessions. We may at that point, as we're seeing these things, have cried tears for them. That was a wild time. Although that was some years ago now, it was a very wild. That was a roller coaster of a time. The very recognition in its turn, however, carries with it its own problems. So unable is the average disciple to free himself from the glamour-making faculties developed in the past, and so hard does he find it to preserve a due proportion and a proper sense of values in regard to the truths of the mental plane. A hard-won truth and a principle of reality can be grasped, and then around it, the disciple can build the easily formed illusions of the mind, which is just beginning to find itself. So there's this treatment where we're seeing this transition from glamour to this new illusion that we're going to be hung up on. So we got our new problem is coming up. The glamours of an emotional nature can emerge and gather around the ideal, for that is as yet unclarified and is prone to attract to itself that which emotionally and sensitively it begins itself to be and have. The glamours of an emotional nature can emerge and gather about the ideal, for that is as yet unclarified and is prone to attract to itself that which emotionally and sensitively it believes itself to be and have. I want to simply say, after these things are seen, we can find ourselves falling back into these things. It's always conscious awareness. It's always being aware. Don't judge. You know, if we withhold judgment, we're less likely to fall into illusion. Because inevitably things do unravel and they unfold, things do become more clear. But even in that clarity, there's still a bewilderment because there's still other glamours and other illusions present. So if we just keep our head down and move and keep moving forward without judging, without judgment, and holding on to any illusions and dogmatizing them, then we're in a safer place, I want to say. So let's look at DK's point here from two angles, both of which are entirely in the realm of discipleship or encountered upon a path of probation. We will call them the illusion of power and the glamour of authority. For this form of words will show you that one is to be encountered upon the astral plane and the other on the mental. The glamour of authority is a mass glamour in most cases. It has its roots in mass psychology and is one of the indications that humanity is at the nursery stages yet, wherein men are safeguarded from themselves by the imposition of some rule, some set of laws, some authoritative dictum emanating from state control, from the rule of an oligarchy, or from the dictatorship of some individual. It reduces mankind as far as one can judge to set forms and standardizes men's activities, regimenting their lives and work. It is imposed and ordered through catering to the fear complex rampant in humanity and rampant in humanity at this time. It certainly is now, as we can see this as we're reading it. And this fear is one of the most fruitful sources of glamour which we have. We might perhaps, and with reason, regard it as the seed of all glamour upon our planet. Fear has been the incentive to those conditions which have brought about the glamour of the astral plane, though not the illusions of the mental levels of consciousness. You know, once this, man, this is, we should all spend some time pondering on this glamour. That just kind of hit me pretty hard in a sense where, I mean, it hit me with eyes wide open where I understand, I got it immediately. And humanity is at the nursery stage as yet. Right? Even though, you know, there's this great awakening going on, so-called, which we hope to be the case, right? No doubt. And we know that people are waking up. Now, you know, what I don't know is how this is, you know, this is just our time. I don't know, you know, people are probably likely always waking up. But Christ is, you know, there is the expectancy of Christ, right? So we have that. And the minds of men must be prepared in advance. There's going to be strife because of polarity. This is something different right here. This glamour of authority. Let's read it one more time because I want just to really sink in. The glamour of authority is a mass glamour in most cases. It has its roots in mass psychology and is one of the indications that humanity is at the nursery stage as yet, wherein men are safeguarded from themselves by the imposition of some rule, some set of laws, some authoritative dictum emanating from state control, from the rule of an oligarchy, or from the dictatorship of some individual. It reduces mankind, as far as one can judge, to set forms and standardizes men's activities, regimenting their lives and work. This is the hamster wheel that's been created for everyone. It is imposed and ordered through catering to the fear complex, mass media, rampant in humanity at this time. Pandemics, all this market, all the diplomatic, all of the economic, all of the militaristic things taking place in the world, all the medical issues, just the terrible education combined with that. And this fear is one of the most fruitful sources of glamour which we have. We might perhaps, and with reason, regard it as the seed of all glamour upon our planet. Fear has been the incentive to those conditions which have brought about the glamour of the astral plane, though not the illusions of mental levels of consciousness. Yeah, no, this can't bring, these are very separate in my mind, though not the illusions of the mental levels. Right, this is a totally different thing we're talking about. This is being totally asleep. This is being actively on the hamster wheel. When the glamour of authority transfers itself into the spiritual consciousness of man, we have such a state of affairs as the period of the Inquisition in its worst forms of church authority, with the emphasis upon organization, government, and penalties, or the unquestioned rule of some teacher. In its highest forms, we have the recognition of the right of the soul or angel, or of the soul or ego, to rule. And that is there's freedom, and that's the real freedom, that's sovereignty, that's the recognition of sovereignty. This is 100% against what these systems are trying to maintain, right? This is the fight. This is the battleground right here that we're talking about. Unbelievable. But once the recognition of the right for the soul or angel to rule, then life can change. Between these two extremes, which express the infancy of the race and the freedom which comes when mankind achieves its majority, and the freedom of the soul, lie all the many types and kinds of intermediate reactions. An illustration of our point, and thus emphasizing the glamour aspect as it affects the disciple and the problem which he faces, what do we find? The disciple has freed himself somewhat from the imposing control of an orthodox teaching and from the rule of a teacher. Very good. He stands, as far as he can tell, free from such control. Knowing, however, his essential weakness, and the lure of the personality, he is on guard against himself and against the ancient rules of control, and learns steadily to stand on his own feet, to come to his own decisions, to distinguish truth for himself. He learns to choose his way, but like all persons who have not taken some of the higher initiations, he can, in due time, become enamored of his freedom and automatically then swing into the glamour of his ideal of freedom. So it's a critical point right there. And there's a decision to be made. An ideal which he has created, he becomes the prisoner of freedom. And this is so clear, because as you're finding your freedom and testing out the limits of your freedom, you inevitably wonder how free am I? And all of our divinity is not up. Our purity is not yet up to par at this point, and so there's still a tendency to, unless it's really grasped the whole, I shouldn't say there is a tendency at this point. I don't know. There can still be the tendency to the left-hand path, which is selfishness, and that's what is the dangerous part of getting to this. That's always the danger. So moving towards selfishness, committing to selfishness as opposed to selflessness, and that's the decision, and that's where the stand has to be made at some point. He rejects all rule except that which he calls the rule of his own soul, forgetting that his contact with his soul is still intermittent. He demands the right to stand alone. He revels in his newfound freedom, certainly. He forgets that, having given up the authority of a teaching and of a teacher, he has to learn to accept the authority of the soul and of the group of souls with which he is affiliated through his karma, his ray type, his choice, and the inevitability of the effect of the at-one-ment. Now, this is pretty far along the path, because I want to say before this, we don't even recognize those things, and we still but we do test our freedom, and we pay the price heavily initially. We learn harsh lessons if we're too loose about our freedom, which I can attest to. I learned the lessons, and as we all do, some of them harder than others, because I took my freedom seriously, and that was, I experimented with my freedom, just like a lot of us. But then there's a turn, and we come back, and we get tamed. That horse is we break it. Having relinquished the guidance of another person upon the path, and having his eyes partially open, he now sees to tread the path to the goal, forgetting, however, that he treads the path in unison with others, and that there are certain rules of the road which he must master, and which he must master in unison with others. He has exchanged the individual law for the group law, but does not yet know that group law as it should be known. And this is so incredibly true here. All right, I'm back. So we don't yet know the rules of the road as we should yet. And, that's an unfortunate thing, because there's potentially opportunity missed in that. We should take our, if I can give any advice, it would be to, get over ourselves in terms of our own feelingness about, habits and such, and really just do it. Just become as pure as you can, become pure to the point where you are comfortable, and that you've attained the purity that you wanted to. That's my best advice for that, because the hindrances, when we don't know the rules of the road are generally in regard to physical plane activity, and still participating in things that that could potentially be not, that are not good for others in the group, because we don't understand how our actions can damage and hurt others when there is a group. And DK talks about this in depth in some places, that we're not going to be admitted to it until you can't do any more harm to a group or those in it, because what you're doing is going to spread to others, and there's a lot in this. So it's really just a matter of getting over ourselves. We can do it. We can, it does seem to take a long time. Just reach the level of purity that you wanted to reach and hold that, right? And then let the rest of it will get taken care of, essentially. But if you know you're doing something that doesn't feel right, then you're doing something that's probably not right. So there's that. We have to avoid evil, because we're trying to seal the door where evil dwells. So look at what you're doing, really try to discern whether it's where, what the origin of it is. We're really not supposed to, any substances should really not be a part of this. The soul is not going to be around when you're participating in, things that are not beneficial. So there's so much there. Really think about it, contemplate all these things. I can't, just say it. I don't want to go off on that tangent for too much longer. It's worthy of some serious conversation. It's worthy of the discussion for certain, and our behaviors and what the social norm is compared to what an integrating soul personality, or what a disciple's norm should be, or what an aspirant's norm should be. These are different things, and we really have to be in the world but not of it, and remove ourselves from those things. This isn't to say you're not going to watch, Doctor Strange and watch movies and look at the deeper aspects of them and get a giggle out of these things. But, do you belong in bars now? Do we, should we be drinking alcohol? And then you say, well, especially if you were a drinker, and you say, well, I don't think it's a problem to have one or two here or there. Well, let's think about that, because what's the difference? Why not just, there's no difference at that point, right? So, well, everything in moderation. Yeah, but have you studied the effects of alcohol on the physical body and on the centers that you are trying to spin up and activate, and for them to become illumined? Have we looked at the potential delay that that's causing, even if you were to drink once a month? Right? Does that set it? So we need to do these things. We need to be educated about really everything. And this is a process, no doubt, because we're not masters. So we're just learning down here in kindergarten. But this is very important, and it all requires I'm not a I don't tell anybody what to do, but this is worth discussion of whether our behavior is beneficial or not. And that's generally pretty cut and dry. And if you're still doing things that are not beneficial, then you just haven't considered, you haven't looked at it enough, and or you haven't suffered enough, and the penalty will come. And then there's that part where if you're being if you're being chastened or learning lessons, and you still don't want to give in, well, your lessons are going to become harsher, and they have to. So it's best to learn them early. I'm wondering if I shouldn't just leave it there for today, because I did go off quite a bit. This was some really great stuff. It's yeah, okay, let's do that. We don't need to continue on and go too much deeper. This was this glamour of authority that we discussed is incredible. We should take some time to really look at that. And I mean, look at it from a higher perspective and look down on it and see the whole thing as to how it's swaying the minds and keeping us all in thrall, and the fear is affecting us. And how this hamster wheel has been created in every aspect of our life, from school through all the ages, from work to school to after school activities to sports to entertainment to all the things that we are participating in, and to the mass media and how we're swayed by media, and then you can see how these entertainment programming places, means of programming, are adding to our own individual glamour. And what's a good example of that? One, doing things that against what you already know, or doing things for because the Joneses are doing them, keeping up with the Joneses. That's always a pretty decent example of that. But the popular trends, if you're involved in popular trends, if you want to have some level of authority over and have influence in those areas, this is really, if money is swaying us, and we're doing things to constantly get ahead that are being put in front of us, like if you're following get rich now things, fear-based, prepper type behaviors, there's a lot. What is freedom? We really have to look at it, and it's almost like full stop and then start over, and look at it, and then decide what is beneficial and what's not. All right, we'll leave it there. Lots of stuff to think about, but we'll pick it back up again tomorrow. Have a good one. Thanks.